This is the In Good Time podcast with Nick Lowe and Andrew Steininger. In this episode, we talk to Cody Maynor, music educator based in Washington State near Puget Sound. Cody is a graduate of Elmhurst College before it was a university. He has a unique perspective on job searching as well as finding the right fit for a job. We speak to him about his musical journey, his education, and the choices he made to get where he is today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the In Good Time podcast. Today, Andrew and I are joined by Cody Maynor, who is a young educator based out of the Seattle area and is also an Elmhurst University, I guess, alumni. And what year did you graduate again? Was that 16?
2015.
2015. All right.
Yeah.
So, Cody, why don't you take a second and just introduce yourself to us and the hopeful viewers?
Yeah, it's great to be on. I'm happy to be asked to do this. My name is Cody. As Nick said, I'm a 2015 graduate of Elmhurst College. I just have to say it that way. It's ingrained. It's so like the Sears Tower, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's so weird. It's whenever you talk about it, it's like college. I don't know.
Just doesn't feel right.
Right.
I am currently the secondary instrumental director for the Tukwila School District in Tukwila, Washington. So through that, I teach 5th through 12th grade band. And then included in that at the high school is a jazz band, pep band, some chamber ensembles that do some community outreach stuff, and a high school level general education guitar class that keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
That sounds like a full schedule.
Yeah, you run the gambit a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, a little bit of everything, except for the choir stuff, which I'm lucky that my district has 3 elementary schools and 3 elementary general music teachers.
Oh, okay.
And then at the secondary level, I have a choral counterpart that does all the choirs and then teaches class piano as well.
Oh, that's great. How big is your school district in your program?
So the high school is less than 1,000 students total enrollment. My program, my high school band this year only has like 18 kids in it. I was hired as kind of the start of a rebuilding process. And then the COVID pandemic just smashed bits and pieces of my 3 years of work. So we're kind of starting fresh next year.
Cody, you're in a similar situation to me. I'm actually teaching right now in a unified district, but it's very small, rural Southern Illinois, where I've got 13 kids in my high school band, but the high school is about 200 kids total.
Oh, wow.
So it's very, very small, but
that's crazy.
Similar to you, I do 4th through 12th band. And I actually do some general music as well.
That's always a different experience, I feel like.
Yeah, everybody leaves college, I think, thinking they're going to be one thing, and they end up being many things.
Right. Yep. Like how Absolutely. I thought I was going to teach band, and well, now I'm teaching a little bit of orchestra too. So.
Yep.
Before we get too deep into what we're doing right now and our connections to Cody, why don't we jump into your musical past and let's see where everything started for you.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as my parents have told me, I was pretty interested in music from an early age. I took some piano lessons in like 3rd, 4th grade. Never practiced, hated practicing. Got pulled from that pretty quick. Not necessarily by choice, but it was the right decision. I wasn't putting in the work. I grew up in Elmhurst. So I went to Conrad Fisher Elementary School and then Churchville Middle School. I still pretty vividly remember Mr. Robert Pettengale, who was my first band director, coming in 4th grade and giving us the old music aptitude test, you know?
Oh.
I think that was right at the beginning of 4th grade, which would have been 2001 for me. And then deciding I wanted to play trumpet. My grandpa was also a trumpet player, so I learned on his Olds Ambassador for the first few years. Middle school was an interesting time at Churchville. This was a little chunk of time where he had 3 directors in 3 years.
Wow.
So I had Mr. Pettingale, 4th, 5th, and 6th. We had another teacher come in for 7th, and then she pretty quickly left, and we ended up with Miss Cynthia Kraus, who is just retiring from Churchville this year. Ended up on a first act horn for a little while because it was my grandpa wanted to get back to playing. Yeah, those were a fun couple of years.
Did you get any sound out of it?
I wouldn't call it good, but it was a sound for sure.
Okay. Sound, yes. Good.
Yep.
No.
But I also had some embouchure issues back then. I used to play like Dizzy Gillespie with the puff cheeks. And as much as a lot was really funky and bad about my 7th grade year, that director was the one who hooked me up with my first private lesson teacher, Lev Garber, who's a band director in one of the Glenbard high schools. And she's the one that helped me fix my embouchure, which, you know, it wasn't perfect. I had to do another embouchure change going into my first year at Elmhurst, but I know it would have held me back if I hadn't. I also got into pop punk music when I was in middle school and started playing drum set in 7th grade, thinking I was going to be the next Travis Barker, touring the world playing drums. But at that same time, I met Mr. Kevin Temple, who is still an English teacher at Churchville, who is like friends with the guys in Rise Against, toured on Ozfest for a couple summers with a band called Apartment 26. He was like, yeah, that was a great time. I made a lot of great memories, but I want to have a family. There's a lot of different things I want to do. And so he was teaching English, and he was the first person to make me think about teaching. Mrs. Kraus was the first one to make me think about teaching music. And then went to York High School, did as much playing as I could, started taking lessons with BJ Cord for a little while, who used to be a freelancer in Chicago, now actually lives in Portland, not too far from me, working at the Monette shop. He's like their main mouthpiece contact. So if you're ever looking for Monette mouthpieces, he's the first guy you talk to, just always. I think my senior year of high school, I started taking lessons with Matt Lee because I knew he was teaching at 2 of the schools I was looking at, and he was in Elmhurst, so I figured, why not? I applied to a few different colleges. My mom made me apply at Elmhurst. It was not on my radar at all. It's like, there's no way I want to be like the townie of the group. And did my auditions. I completely just destroyed, and not in the good way, my DePaul audition, which is crazy because Matt Lee is one of the teachers there.
Right.
Did an audition at NIU, did pretty well. And then went to my audition at Elmhurst. And despite having 10 people in that audition room staring at me, it felt like home. Like it just felt right for me. It was the choir room at that time, a room I had not been in before, even though I'd been on campus. And it felt right. Pretty quickly decided that's where I was going to spend the next 4 years. That turned into 5. And absolutely have not regretted that choice.
So before we get too far into the college career, let's take one step back real quick. And Nick and I did this when we did our first episode, where we kind of just followed our mindset of where we were with music, what we thought about music as we kind of grew up. We'll go all the way back. Middle school, where was your head? Like when you thought of music, or you thought of yourself playing music, where was your head? Like from middle school to high school?
Especially like 7th, 8th grade, it was all about, I want to be a touring rock musician. Like this is a way to connect with people and connect with people around the world. I create. And that was my driving factor. Like trumpet was always my main school thing. And I actually remember like saying this to people before, but as soon as I got outside of school, it was all about drums. except for my like 1 45-minute lesson a week, which means those lessons were usually pretty tough, and I did not progress very well. For what it's worth at the middle school level, I was first chair for a lot of it, but I wasn't putting in the work progressing because I didn't think trumpet was going to do anything for me. I thought it was all about the drums and just playing as loud and fast as I could.
So what ended up getting you to switch over? Because it sounds like at some point drums kind of passed. Was that because of the your teacher, the English teacher you had talked to?
Not so much, because I had him in 6th grade, and then well, I guess it kind of was. I did an interview with him for the Churchville newspaper when I was in 8th grade. And I guess that is kind of where things started to switch. And also knowing like my educational experience with percussion wasn't percussion. Like I could read music and I could read rhythm pretty well, but it was all drum set based. So if you at that point in time would put me on like timpani, I'd have been a fish out of water, and it would not have gone well. I always enjoyed trumpet, and I had made some pretty decent friends, like specifically through playing trumpet. It was more in high school where my mentality shifted. And part of that was I had a teacher at one point tell me I needed to switch to euphonium because I have bigger lips, and they were like, oh, that means euphonium. And so besides just kind of defying that, I was like, this is actually a lot of fun. There's a lot of things to do with it. 8th grade was my first experience with like a jazz band. And that all like 8th grade, freshman year of high school kind of started to shift my mentality of maybe I could do more with the trumpet than I can with the drum set.
So now you're in high school, and I think we all, I mean, as we get older, we start to lose the memories of what it was like to be a younger person. But I think at least for all of us right here, we all still remember what it was like to do the college search, right? The college application and audition process. So as you approached senior year and as you did your college auditions, where were you at thinking about yourself as a musician / what you wanted to do in college?
I think for the most part, I had decided music ed was the way to go, partially because there were some kind of rough spots in my music ed career up to that point. Some teachers that I got along with but didn't always agree with. And it was more classroom management stuff than like teaching things. Like just days that would rub us wrong. And then I pretty quickly had the realization that the best people I was surrounding myself with at that point were all the band kids. The group I hung out with, especially my junior, senior year, were all super high level honors AP kids, which I wasn't. I took some honors classes and technically 2 AP classes, but we all knew each other through band. And those, as I was kind of surveying most of the people I was around, it's like, these are the people that I want to remain in contact with. Like, looking back on it, they're the people that gave me the most positive experiences that were somewhat shaping, kind of have definitely helped make me who I am today, whether I knew it back then or not.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. And I'll ask you a question in a second. But as educators and as kids go through college, and I remember coming to this conclusion towards the end of my college career, is that if you want to get good at something, or if you want to pursue something and allow yourself to stay on that path, you kind of have to surround yourself with people that are going to keep you on that path. So
absolutely,
for you, was that a conscious thought that you actually were reflective enough at that age to say, okay, I'm starting to see that I like these people better, and I think I'm going to stay in that path with them? Or was it more of just a feeling that you went with?
I think it was more just a feeling. I was definitely not that self-aware back then. I wish I could say I was, but that level of self-awareness has come about very, very recently for me. And reflecting back on it, I kind of think that's where I ended up.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of self-awareness that we're trying to inspire in some of our future music educators at the college level.
Yeah,
Thinking
absolutely.
about the future.
It's important for sure.
So
So it
now,
sounds
go ahead.
like before I was gonna say, so it sounds like um, for you the biggest impact leading you towards music was the social side of it. Was there any
Yeah.
specific musical moments that you had that made you just like it just clicked or something?
There's a few things here and there I remember. A lot of them are actually still tied to that social thing. Like my junior year, our first home football game for marching band was on my birthday.
Oh,
And
yeah, there you go.
it just happened to be, I shared a birthday with someone else in the band. And so I still remember, I mean, you guys know how big the York marching band is.
Mhm.
That entire band in the end zone singing happy birthday to us. And
Mhm.
then we ended up becoming really good friends. Um, a lot of my sophomore year sticks out in high school because I didn't audition into the top band going into sophomore year.
Mhm.
We were supposed to have a section of like 6 or 7 in the second band, and it ended up being a section of 3, which I pretty quickly was kind of given ownership of, and getting to play some really cool stuff that year. Like Mr. Pavlik, who is the head director of the second band, really stretched us that year. I mean, we did a piece called Machu Picchu, City in the Sky,
Mhm.
that is just super cool, really programmatic. Um, I very vividly remember just beating myself up trying to learn the solo parts to Bayou Breakdown, which I've revisited recently and it still kicks my butt. And then getting into jazz band for the first like full time my sophomore year of high school, and getting to work with that director who was just absolutely amazing.
I think when Nick and I have visited our past, and we visited the past of some other people that we think about, we often see just this kind of diverse set of experiences that kind of all contribute to us taking the path that we did, and we see the same
Yeah.
thing with you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, just from sophomore year up until from middle school up until graduating high school. I mean, I did all the middle school concert band stuff, solo and ensemble, a semester of jazz band, or like a performance cycle of jazz band at the middle school
Mhm.
level. I was in rock, metal, punk bands throughout middle
Mhm.
school, kind of just typical alternative rock groups in high school. I was in a ska band for a while in high school. And then we also had the community outreach of chamber ensembles, pep band, marching band, jazz combo.
Mhm.
So many different things that just,
Mhm.
I knew that was something I always wanted to be involved in.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's where the value comes in our appreciation of music and what we bring to our students, where
Absolutely.
we have that diverse set of experiences where we know that we've seen the academic music side of
Mhm.
things. That's what we went to school to do, but we also have all of these other interests and experiences with
Yeah.
that.
And I
Yeah.
love sharing that with students.
Yes.
Like, I mean, you guys ever do the song and tell exercise with Find Me Alpha?
I'm trying to think if we did. I think we did once. It was a
Maybe
It was
when we
while
usually
were
ago.
part of
very
the
young.
PM
Yeah,
process.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah.
So through the virtual thing, I've done that with my students every week
Mm.
for almost the last year, because we have a short day on Wednesdays.
Mm.
Okay.
And so I just have them fill out a Google form, and I get to hear their music. And
Yeah.
then a couple times a week, as we're doing music before class, they get to see all the other stuff
Mhm.
into, like the hip hop, the Linkin Park kind of stuff, the Blink 182.
Mhm.
And it's amazing to have conversations with students about that stuff. It's just so unique that you don't see anywhere else.
Yeah, because so often, we have it in our heads that our music teachers, if they're a band teacher or a private lesson teacher, we have it in their head that all they listen to is the classical music or stuff. But then you find out
Exactly.
there's all this extra stuff. So I
Exactly.
love hearing how each person brings that unique background to the table of the ska band and
So speaking of more unique experiences, so now you have gone through your audition process, and now Elmhurst is your place. So
Yeah.
you are a freshman in college. Where are you at? Like, give us, like, you're 75% done with freshman year.
hmm
What's going on in your head?
Um, so at that point, I was having some doubts about things. I was struggling pretty heavily through an embouchure change again, because I went from playing like Dizzy with the, to instead of playing roughly half top, half bottom, I was almost all on my bottom lip. I have no idea how I made that work for 5 years and
Cody, I
how
feel ya.
I don't understand.
Right going into my sophomore year, I had the exact same
Yeah.
embouchure change, and let me tell you, I know it. It's the worst.
It makes such a difference.
It really
And
does.
so, like I said, I had been with Matt Lee already through all of my senior year of high school. And he goes, "You're top dog senior year. I'm not going to do this now. But as soon as summer hits, we're switching." And it stunk. But even through, most of freshman year, it was still a struggle. And so I was struggling. I was questioning things, but I was also very much happy with where I was. I was, I realized really quickly, I think freshman year, I would not have gotten to do everything I did throughout my college career if I had gone someplace else. Like if I had not completely just wrecked my audition at DePaul, I know I would have had to choose between classical and jazz. At that point, probably choose between band and orchestra. I wouldn't have been able to do, I think the most I was ever in one semester was 6 or 7 ensembles. I would not have been able to do all that. I wouldn't have been able to grow my percussion chops the way that I did, being a lot of times one of 2 people in the orchestra percussion section. And so I realized freshman year pretty quickly that this was absolutely the right choice. I had just enough boxes being ticked that I knew it was good, and I knew I had to kind of start putting in more work than I was, and it would pay off in the long run.
That's a good point in time to realize that. Something funny
Yeah.
that Nick and I often joke about is when we look back at our college career, and specifically the social circles that we ran.
Yeah.
There's a large number of people that start off music ed, and by the time we got to our senior year, there's significantly less. So we always joked that we would put together like a little PowerPoint presentation that said "In Memoriam," and
Yep.
it's just like a sad song that rolls through all of our, from freshman year 2015 to
Yep.
sophomore year 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't want to say attrition rate because that sounds just so bad.
It sounds like
The
we're at
number of
boot
people
camp.
that really quickly just go, not for me.
Right. So then flipping ahead to the following year, were you still going through some of those same struggles, or by sophomore year had you kind of affirmed your music ed identity, I guess?
A little bit. There were still some of those struggles, but I think getting into the weeds with the work and conducting one, I was like, yeah, no, this is absolutely what I want to be doing. This is just fantastic. That class did a lot for me, for sure.
And I know that there was a couple different changes in teachers in that class. Who did you have for that class? That was kind of your inspiration then.
That was the team of Judy and Donna.
Okay,
Which,
gotcha.
I mean, you can't really like 2 more different conductors and teachers,
Right,
but they just played off of each other so perfectly. It was such a good class. The people in that class definitely helped it too. But yeah, just having both of their voices was phenomenal.
when Nick and I went through, Judy had just retired. Judy retired
Okay.
our freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
So we had, I think, was it just Donna that taught our freshman class, or was Dr. Heil in there as well?
I want to say
Or
Dr.
sophomore class?
Heil was in there as well. I think he was in the background, and Donna was the main instructor
Right.
of the course, is what I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've done that a few times. I know, like my sophomore year, or no, for part of my conducting one experience, Ross was in there just watching because he was teaching the class for non-music ed majors like the next semester. It was one of the few times that they ran conducting one second semester for like the comp majors and the business majors.
I remember seeing a couple of those classes with all the jazz studies majors in there. That was always very entertaining. Oh, and
it was
even
fun.
better,
I got to
even better when they had to conduct the I forget the name of the silly Christmas piece that we had to do, the holiday piece for the final.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
when they
Joyous Christmas.
when they got to go up and conduct it.
I've still got that score here somewhere. Like
So
my
do you
original
really?
conducting one binder, all the highlighter marks, all the notes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is funny how in that first conducting class, it's like you're highlighting everying, and you're like, one accent doesn't matter; it's getting highlighted.
The entire measure.
Right. You look at it and you're just like, yeah, okay, this is yellow, and this does not help me at all.
Just gives you a headache staring at it.
Right. So flipping over to we've talked a lot about the music and the lessons and conducting. How was it in your education classes going up, getting into some of those upper level courses?
Especially the upper level stuff. So when they added those, like the seminar, the 200 something, 300, 400, it was at a really weird point for me where I was told I would be grandfathered out of those. And then it was either a misunderstanding or they stepped that back. So I ended up not taking SEC 200 or whatever it was, the first of those seminar courses. I had some issues with one of the 300 courses. I remember Dan Jarris was the teacher, and I loved him. He was great. But I was going through a point where I was like, is there really a point to this? Like, I'm already doing X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
Why am I doing this? And I didn't do too hot on that. And then my last semester taking SEC either 450 or 420, whichever one was difficult. Because we all know one of them wasn't. I had Dr. Brown, who is an amazing teacher. I absolutely adored her. But for some reason, I could not wrap my head around the content. I was in schools often. I had already gone through the rigor of conducting 3, which was Dr. Griffin's first semester teaching conducting 3 there.
Interesting.
And it was tough. That was one of the hardest classes of my college career by far. And so Dr. Brown's class just kind of killed me. And probably about halfway through the semester, she kind of pulled me aside and was like, what's going on? You need to step it up. Like, you should be here, but you're like down here. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I honestly don't know what to tell you. I will put in the work, whatever you need me to do. So I had like that kind of negativity happening. But then on the other side, my playing was kind of falling into place. My conducting was always never really an issue. And I was starting to connect with the kids that I was doing field experiences with. So it was just kind of this weird yin and yang where it's like, really well, but apparently I need to shape up at the same time.
It's kind of like the dichotomy, and I'm sure that was hard to kind of wrap your head around. Okay.
Yeah, Nick and I, we had discussed previously what it was kind of like to be half split between, the music side of things and the education side of things. Because there are in a lot of ways they are two opposing forces where you're asked
Yeah.
to be focused on teaching and planning and assessing and all of those things, but at the same time we're still focused inwardly on our own playing and improving in that way.
Yeah. And especially for me, because I did a jazz studies minor throughout
Mhm.
my career as well. So I had upper level jazz theory classes that I was taking at the same time.
Mm.
I was lazy and had one gen ed left to take that semester.
Oh.
And then I was also doing my last recital
Mm.
because I was stupid and did 3 full recitals instead of just 2.
Wow.
Yeah, that last semester was a lot.
It sounds like it. But then the glorious moment came and you got to student teach.
Yes.
Give us a brief overview of your student teaching and then maybe like some of the biggest takeaways that you have now that you picked up in your student teaching.
My experiences were very yin and yang. So I student taught beginner through middle school level with James Wallace when he was still at the middle school in West Chicago. Yeah.
I know.
And then
I know James.
he's fantastic.
I went to West Chicago High School.
I thought you did. I thought I remembered you saying that before. I actually know all 3 of those directors there now because it's James at the high school,
Yeah.
Brad at the middle school.
Yep.
The 5th grade director, Zach, was a student at Hinsdale South when I was their marching band tech. So I did 5 years of brass teaching with their marching band. Great guy. I'm sure great teacher. That's got to be a powerhouse over there now, or getting there, And then my high school was in Westmont with Hank Vaughn. I knew pretty early I wanted to student teach with James. I had met him, observed a couple times. Judy and everyone at Elmhurst spoke highly of him. Hank was kind of a quick decision kind of thing. And my high school student teaching experience was just okay. I learned a lot, but he prioritizes different things than I do. So it just didn't entirely click. I know he's not at Westmont anymore for reasons, but my experience with James was absolutely fantastic. I had some really good teaching moments, but again, some of those, you really need to kind of shape up and fly straight kind of moments. Most of which had to do with either Ross or Joanne May observing me and, doing those probing questions that they do for, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And not really having good answers. And then coming back the next day and talking through all of those with James. And that was great. I literally, for most of my time with James, I taught everything except for the one-on-one bassoon lessons, which I'm thankful for. I'm very thankful for that.
You would have been shedding.
That's for sure. I did a little bit of oboe lessons with Gail in my undergrad, but oboe is just a different story.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate. And this is my 2nd year of teaching and my 2nd year of having 0 oboes in my 5th grade band. And I'm okay with that.
Yep. Absolutely.
So right after student teaching, then where was your first full-time job? You said you had done 5 years at Hinsdale South. Was that was that a full-time thing or over the summer, or what did that look like?
Yeah, that was just summers and then Friday nights. I probably would have started that after my sophomore year because Josh Cook went there. He was their woodwind teacher. The brass teacher bowed out and he was like, you should do this. This would be perfect for you. So that would have been 2012. I did that 2012 until I moved out here. 2 weeks-ish in the summer, and then Friday nights with the football games and every so often on Saturday, plus Chicago downtown Thanksgiving Day parades. Were cold, to say the least. And so my first full-time gig was up in Waukegan. So I was teaching 6th through 8th grade band and orchestra at Thomas Jefferson Middle School. Actually started that gig about 3 weeks into the school year. The person who was supposed to do it, so most schools up there are split a band job and an orchestra job, and they also go to elementaries. But the band director at the time wanted to focus more on his family. So he switched to being just elementary.
Mm-hmm.
The orchestra director absorbed the band job. And then about a month before school started, he dipped and went to take a job in the district he went to. I think the middle school he went to also. And so Joanne May's daughter knew one of the other orchestra teachers who was actually also a split band and orchestra job. And yeah, that was the first gig. I did 2 years up there.
Okay. So also did orchestra. Did you have any orchestra experience outside of, you said you were in the percussion section?
Yeah, that was about it. I did tend to listen when Joanne was teaching the strings because I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew at some point I would pick up a nugget that might be useful somewhere down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some experience. I've also got enough people who are full-time orchestra. Like I could not tell you how many times I texted Tim Januszewski and Madeline Feeney. Like, I've got an orchestra interview next week.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to check my boxes?
Mm-hmm.
Or I have my first orchestra rehearsal tomorrow. What do I talk about?
Right.
And those two were such a huge help for me, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Looking back on it, is that something that you are glad to have the experience of, or is that something that you wish that maybe you only had the band so you could have focused more?
No, that program was kind of in a good place, and my mentality was in a good enough place where splitting was fine. Actually, I loved the orchestra kids. Like, for whatever reason, after the first year, the majority of them, like their sense of humor, the way that they are motivated just clicked with me really, really well. And I still keep in contact more with some of those orchestra kids once they've graduated high school than I do the band kids.
For any of people who are listening who are very avoidant of maybe the other side, that's a good reminder that like not only can anything happen, but you might end up really enjoying it and connecting with some people.
Yeah, absolutely. I taught a lot of boys sectionals for choir at that gig too, because the teacher at the time was a very, very hardcore soprano and very, very much like, the way I can teach these boys, they do not have the same register as me. It's just never going to transfer. And it was, so having a bit of all three of those all at once, I was like, okay, duh, I love band. This is everything to me. I started up a jazz band up there for a little bit too, so I was able to share some of that with them. Orchestra is so much fun. Like, it's just, it really is the other side of the coin when it comes to instrumental music. Kind of worked my way through being able to actually play viola and cello a bit, because those were two of the hardest instruments for me for some reason. And then just loved like going over to the room, grabbing a bass and just playing along. It was so much fun to me. And then being able to use that bass for jazz band too, or on a day my tuba player wasn't in for band, I was able to fill out the parts and kind of make sure that they're still hearing that and talk about that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is something that I always will talk about probably until the day I stop teaching, is what you need to do as a young educator is realize that you're not going to know everything ever, and
absolutely
do the best you can every day to fill in all the gaps that you've got. Even if there's no way that you are going to know all the things you know for your first job.
No.
But you have to start to figure those things out once you get there. And that's sounds like exactly what you did. You saw areas that you needed to continue to grow along with your students, and you continually, repetitively filled those gaps in.
Yeah, and I asked questions every time I could. I'm a big proponent of there being no dumb questions. And with my students, if you are thinking it, chances are someone else in the room is as well. And for me, it was, okay, I tell them this. If I have a question, I need to ask it. I went to more orchestra sessions at the Midwest Clinic those 2 years than I've ever even glanced at since then.
Yeah.
Like I said, texting Tim and Madeline every turn I needed. Every time we had district level PD go into the orchestra stuff, I was lucky in that they allowed me to observe other teachers in the district my first year.
Oh, that's great.
And so I went straight to the orchestra only teachers. I'm like, I don't have all the answers for band. I know that, but I have even less answers for orchestra. So I'm going to them. And it worked out great.
Yeah, I think part of the nice thing about being in a situation like that, where like you've had the experience of being in orchestras and consuming that knowledge, and then turning around and having it your job, where you know enough where you're teaching it, but you're also learning at the same time, is I think really valuable, because then you're directly able to tell the students, like, hey, when you practice it, do it this way. Here's what you need to keep in mind, and here's what you remember. Because not only is it fresh for you, but you're actively engaging yourself in the process of learning. And so, like, the kids are able to see that, and they respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm big with my students, no matter what I'm teaching, what I'm doing, whether it's a guest clinician thing. I'm always like, if I'm telling you to do something a certain way, there's a reason. It's either something that I have practiced so many times and know that it works for me, or it's something I know somebody else has used successfully. I'm not going to just throw something at you. So like there's always a reason for it. And it's, if you trust that, I promise it will work. But I'm also giving them 10 different ways to do things, because I know if we have 20 different people in the room, we've got 20 completely different learners. So trying to find that balance.
So speaking of there being a reason for things, what was your reason and draw to get you out to Seattle, all the way out from the Chicagoland area?
Yeah. So as weird as this sounds, having gone through a music ed program, I did not start drinking coffee until I was a year and a half out of school.
What?
Yeah.
How did you survive?
Energy drinks. Honestly, yeah, it was bad. And so it was that. In 2014, I started cycling pretty heavily on the road. The drop bar, trying to go on the spandex, and all that. It's a great look. And then the 2016-2017 school year, I wasn't in a great place. I wasn't super happy in that job for a lot of reasons. I wasn't playing places that I was super happy with. I was a little isolated because I lived up in Mundelein at that point. And some people would come and visit, some people wouldn't, that it's just kind of how adult relationships go. Yeah. Especially with most of the folks I was friends with just being about to finish up their college career.
Right.
So we were busy, that's just how it is. So mentally I wasn't in a great place. Physically, I had gained back a bunch of weight that I had lost. I wasn't quite at my heaviest, but I was pretty close. And then January 2017 hit, and I was like, I need to do better. Like, I need to do better for myself, because I'm not giving my students the best. Started working out, started getting in shape. That spring break, Mike Napentek and I did a road trip out to Nashville. We kind of piggybacked onto his sister's trip, and it was 2 days in the Smokies, 2 days in Nashville proper, and then I think 2 days on our own in Nashville. And like we hit the Indiana border, and we were like, ooh, this looks better than Illinois does right now. I think that means we need a break from Illinois. He, at that point, was kind of in between jobs. Like I said, I just wasn't in a good place in a lot of ways. And so we spent the week out there. I got in the mountains. I was like, this is what like the country could look like. It's not all pancake flat. Because I didn't do a whole lot of traveling when I was younger. I stayed mostly in the direct Midwest. Like, besides a little bit of time in North Carolina when I was a small child, I didn't really go farther out than Minnesota through my undergrad, except for Jamaica, but that's Jamaica.
Right.
And so we came back And real honesty, 2 days later, my grandma passed away. It was expected. She had been in hospice for a while. I was able to see her before she passed away, right after I got back. And so I was kind of thinking about it already. And then she passed away. That Monday, I was actually rejoining Ross's band. So I was coming in as a community member right before the last concert, and I was switching to euphonium for that concert. So I went up, had a beautiful conversation with Ross. I mean, you guys know what it's like to talk to him. It's immediately, you just like feel all warm and fuzzy.
Yes.
And when he goes, "How was your day?" I was like, "Well, honestly, not great." And as he was in the middle of his score study and all that, he just closed his computer, set down his pencil, and just talked. And so my uncle came in for the services. My mom was out of the room because she would have hated this conversation. I was like, I'm thinking about moving away for a little bit. I need a change. I go, these are the things that I'm into. And he lives on Bainbridge Island, which is just west. And he goes, "Well, the band director at my school is retiring. I could put in a good word." And so I started doing some research about the Seattle area. And I'm like, there's a rainforest 2 hours away. Canada is 3 hours away. Portland's 2 hours away. There's mountains, water, city. Cycling is huge here. Starbucks originated out here, so coffee is huge. Don't know much about the music scene at this point, but I'm sure I can find it. I mean, this is the birthplace of grunge. There's got to still be something going on. And I pretty quickly applied for everything I found out here, which included Bainbridge. It included Tukwila. There was another suburb, Renton, that was opening a brand new middle school that was hiring. And then a month later was when Ross passed away. So I just went, I need to get out for a while. Like I can't do this anymore. And just kind of made the decision that it was going to happen, and kind of followed a friend of mine out here who has since moved away. But, it's worked. Like it's a very good place for me.
Yeah, I think two things. First off, for some of our listeners who are younger, who may not know, Ross Kellen used to be the director of music ed at Elmhurst College, and before that, he was a legendary director at Glenbard East for I think it was something like 30 or 40 years. They named a whole wing after him. But he had a huge impact on the music ed students while he was at Elmhurst. And I believe he was there for over 10 to 15 years or something like that.
That sounds right.
I think it was less than 20. But he was just he was a force in motivating young music educators and really connecting them to their own thoughts. That's kind of what I got from Ross. Is he was just
absolutely
really good at getting you to think about what exactly you were feeling about music ed and really your kind of experience.
If you're an Elmhurst student right now, next time you're on campus, go to the steps on Irian, turn around and walk toward Main Hall and check out the first bench you pass.
Yeah, that's it. And I forgot what the second thing I was going to say.
Beautiful.
So now we're in Seattle.
Yeah.
And let's have maybe one or two things that have been kind of the most impactful for you so far, and then we'll jump into how all three of us know each other and our history.
Yeah. One of the first things was trying to make connections. There's a school out here that's very similar to Elmhurst, where when you graduate, you are part of a fairly tight-knit community. And you may not be best friends with everyone, but you know everyone. Like there's so many people at Elmhurst right now who I know of, but have never met before. And so many of them I know have heard stories about when I was there, but they'll never meet the people those stories are about. And so Central Washington is kind of a similar school. Powerhouse jazz program out here, killer music ed program. And so I had no music friends out here my first year. And then I met kind of the Washington equivalent to Quinlan and Fabish is Ted Brown Music Company. So I met one of their road reps at my first high school festival with my kids. And he goes, "Oh, dude, you're looking for connections. You want to start networking. You should come up to this Birch Bay workshop that us and JW Pepper host every year." And honestly, it has been the single best decision I've made. I love the people I live with. They are all amazing people and people I sincerely hope I consider friends long after we don't live together, because I live with 4 other people. But this workshop it just transformed everything. It is a week of sight reading, all band directors, up just south of the Canadian border. So it's about an hour and a half away. Most of us will stay in condos up on Birch Bay, and then we go and sight read new concert band music. So it's 6-ish hours a day of sight reading. And we do 2 full days of concert band music, 2 full days of jazz band music, and then another half day of concert band. It's all new, except for like they throw in a few golden oldies, they call them. And so it's anything released from the time Birch Bay released last year until as close to the next session as they can get. So it's almost exactly a year's worth of music, all different ranges from grade 0.5 up to collegiate professional level. And I met just some awesome people, like amazing teachers, amazing musicians. One of whom in particular, his name is Neil Proff. He is the band director at Lake Stevens High School, which is north of me. And I was sitting down. I did not stay in Birch Bay, my decision ever. I drove like an hour and a half, 2 hours back and forth every single day. But Friday, like I said, it's just a half day. We clean up, go to lunch. We're sitting there at lunch, and he goes, "You've got a decent sound. Who are you playing with right now?" I'm like, "I'm not," which was part of the reason that first year was rough. He goes, "Well, I run a band out of Kirkland. It's called the Eastside Modern Jazz Orchestra. We're always looking for subs. Do you want to be put on my list?" I was like, "Duh, of course I do." And literally like 3 weeks later, he's texting me. He goes, "Hey, trumpet player can't make it tonight. Can you come out?" Sure, why not? And it was one of the toughest rehearsals I've ever sat through, because it's high level stuff. And he comes up to me afterwards and he goes, "You've got a pretty good sound. I've seen that book just kick some players' butts before, but you held on. Do you want it? That chair is open."
Wow.
And so it got me into the playing community. It got me playing with a band who is, honestly, it's one of the best bands I've ever played with. Like, I am the worst one in the room, and it just makes me work so much harder. And there's so many things, like some of the guys went to North Texas. A couple of the guys marched with a few different drum corps, and then a bunch of them are Central Washington guys. And so it's made me both try and push my kids farther. I've taken a lot of what Neil gives us during our rehearsals, and I try to toss it back at them in the best way possible. And then it's made me really try and get my playing into gear, because the trumpet soloist for our band is just beyond phenomenal. So that's probably the first thing, is meeting Neil and getting in with that crew. And then the second thing is probably, again, very, very specifically musically, I've been taking private lessons for a decent chunk of the time that I've been out here, focusing on trumpet, but really trying to put a focus on improvisation, because I'd never put in the work in college. Doug, Frank, and Kirk all tried, and I didn't do it. Like it never clicked with me for some reason. And so I've been taking lessons with a trumpet player by the name of Jared Hall, who has been changed my thought process around my own sound production, but also changed how I teach kind of the basic fundamentals of just playing in general, and how I teach sound concept to my students. those two things have just been huge for me out here.
Yeah, I think something that's really important for young educators and even older educators that might be in transition, moving to a different place or taking on a new challenge in their career. The idea of the human in the musician, right? So when we go look for a
Absolutely.
job, or when we go to go teach something, or when we go to go learn something new, you got to figure out how you can exist as a human in that role
Yeah.
before you just go all full blown professional, because you can look
Uh-huh.
at a job description and say, okay, yeah, I know how to do jazz, I know how to do fifth grade band, I know how to whatever. But if you go implant yourself someplace where you're really not going to be able to connect to anything or
Mm-hmm.
not that many things, you're not. That's going to transfer over to your ability to do your job.
Yeah.
And like you just said, what I just heard in my brain, what I heard you just say was, I found joy in playing, and
Yeah.
now that is transferring joy into my teaching, and that's beautiful.
Absolutely. And I've got stuff outside of music too that I'm really happy about. Like I said, just being able to get in the mountains for a day and go for either an easy or a difficult hike uh, just makes a world of difference for me. Being able to, ride my bike and get a good workout, or
Mhm.
ride with people and get an easier workout, but have
Mhm.
great conversation the entire way,
Mm-hmm.
just makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, it sounds like you have really come into a place in your life where you are combining the manly musician and the musicianly man. For those of you who
What a concept.
oh yeah, for those of you listening who get it, you get it. But speaking of which, this is a good chance to transfer to how Andrew and I know you, Cody, and that would
Yeah.
be through the organization of Phi Mu Alpha primarily at Elmhurst, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so we didn't cross paths for very long because you graduated in 2015, right? That was
Yep.
the year you graduated, and Nick and I started as freshmen in 2015. So
Yeah.
you got to see us. Oh wait, so did you graduate the year? Were you there for a year while we were there,
I don't
or did
think
you?
so,
I
because
think you.
I was out spring 2015.
Okay, right. So we didn't actually academically cross paths
Yeah.
at all, but you were very present in our PM process while we were there.
Yeah.
I remember that for sure.
Yeah, I was living with Scott Stolars at the time,
Oh,
and we were
okay.
living in Elmhurst. So I
That
know
was a
we
fun
had,
house.
oh, I don't know if fun's the word for it, but that's like my horror story house. I love Scott. It had nothing to do with him. It was the house and the landlord. It was just terrible.
Mm.
But yeah, I think I was alumni relations officer at the time too.
Oh,
Um,
that's right.
so I definitely like the education program of Pi Iota was like my baby. The last huge revision to the PM process was me and Josh. I was still alumni relations, and I was still playing in Judy's band because that was her last year.
Mhm.
So I was definitely around on campus a lot. The tailgate tents for homecoming were my dad's.
Yeah.
I think the bags that we used were my dad's for cornhole.
You
We
know what's
had the pig roast at your dad's house, didn't we?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
And you know what's funny is that I purchased a bookshelf and like an entertainment center for you, and
Yes.
I picked up the bookshelf. I've still got it. I to this day have never
Beautiful.
picked up. To this day I've never picked up the entertainment center.
I think it's still in my parents' garage. It's probably still there. And it's still probably got your name on it.
Probably.
Before we lose too many of potential listeners, so we all of us three were in a fraternity at Elmhurst called Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia, which is a men's music fraternity. And the quote that Nick said earlier, "The manly musician and the musicianly man," is a quote that's used a lot in the education process in that particular fraternity. And without giving away too many secrets of our fraternity, the idea is that we exist in this world and we see value in the harmony and the the things that you learn from being a musician, but what also it means to be an upright man as a musician. And Cody played a significant role in reforming the fraternity while we were coming in to bring it back up to what it is today.
I have nothing but fond memories of Phi Mu Alpha. And I feel like the people in that organization when I was around, and just the base ideals of Phi Mu Alpha taught me a lot. And I get a lot of scoffs on the initial phrase of, yeah, I was in a fraternity. And then a laugh when I say it was a music fraternity. But then we start getting into it and people are like, oh, okay, I get that. That makes a lot of sense.
What I found to be particularly valuable now thinking back about my experience in Sinfonia is not necessarily any of the titles that come with it or any of the specifics of things that we had to do as members of part of that organization, but it was the idea that we had a group of gentlemen who had a singular serious thought about their interest in music, and that we can get together and we could talk about that.
Yeah.
And that, that kind of, that support, the knowledge that there is a group of people that are getting together just because they're interested in music. That was like pretty serious for me going through college.
Okay.
I don't know if there was ever a moment that I would say that it, like, I don't know, brought me back from the brink. People have stories like that, but it served as a point of strength in times when, like, maybe my classes weren't going as well or whatever. But it's just another one of those things that, just like you're saying, with your time in Seattle, if you find a group of people that kind of can come together for a singular goal, that gives you a lot of motivation and a lot of strength to continue on in your activities.
Absolutely. And there was just so many kind of reaffirming situations in that, both as a young, impressionable person going through the PM process, because I rushed right away. I went into college thinking I was going to change 95% of who I was, and that's how I was going to be, quote unquote, popular. And then I sat down at the first Rush event. And at this point, so I was super tan. I was wearing a gold chain. I had a chin strap and buzzed hair. And I was just getting ribbed, like, immediately. But it was so much fun. And I remember sitting down with, I remember Jacob Hamilton being there. Sam Simpson was there at that first event. David Nevin, who ended up becoming my big brother, and just being like, these guys are idiots. but I'm an idiot. This is so much fun. And then through the PM process, noticing that there were both people who related to me and then people who saw qualities in myself that I didn't see at that time. It just, I sincerely feel like Phi Mu Alpha transformed my collegiate experience for the better. And it's fun being out here now because there's a small group of Sinfonians up here. I have not gotten to meet up with them yet, but if you guys ever heard the name Austin Derflinger, he went to U of I. He's also always at Midwest. He is always at the booth at Midwest.
I think I've seen the name somewhere, but I can't say I know the individual.
Yeah. He and his partner moved out here. I, for a while, always had my Phi Mu Alpha lanyard on. I just recently had to ditch it because it was getting disgusting. And at my first Birch Bay, one of the French horn players I was talking to went, "Are you a Sinfonian?" And he was part of one of the Seattle area chapters before it shut down. And pretty recently, Washington actually reactivated a chapter down at Washington State. So trying to get down there at some point and just kind of pay it forward a bit.
Yeah. So as we get close to wrapping things up here, why don't you, if you would, Cody, give us some quick tips and maybe some big takeaways and points for the music educators coming up at Elmhurst?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things, and I don't remember who taught me this, that has, I think, led to a lot of trust between students and I. When I don't know an answer, I tell them I don't know. Um, I never BS because it's just going to come back to bite you later. Um, and if I don't know, like 90% of the time, my response is, I don't know, but let me find out for you. And I do everything I can to get that answer. I mean, you can see that bookshelf back there is all music stuff. Let me find out for you. But then also making sure that student voices are being heard. I can give them 5 good pieces if they don't feel heard or validated or like they have some sort of say in things.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to happen. They're never going to click with it. So I always ask for input. If it's part of the way through a concert cycle and things just aren't clicking, I try to find out why. Sometimes it's just, no, this is really difficult and I just haven't put in the work yet. Sometimes I get, yeah, I just really don't like this piece. And I try to find out why and try to spin it the way that Judy used to, and be like, well, your favorite piece is the one that you're working on right now. It just kind of has to be at some point. But every year when I fly back for Midwest, I have them do a repertoire selection assignment. So they look up pieces on J.W. Pepper and I just put it all into a list. Anytime there's multiple votes for one, I kind of fast track that one through my ordering process. And yeah, there's always at least one piece on a concert that is specifically requested by students. The other thing that has become more and more important to me is choosing music by composers who look like my students. Concert band music is very much owned by old dead white guys. And there are very few schools where every single student is male and every single student is white. So I am actively seeking out composers of color every chance I get, actively seeking out LGBTQ composers, which Robert Sheldon is one of my favorites, and he is a member of that community. And then female composers as well, trying to make sure that I am certainly highlighting female composers and musicians. Big fan of Kate Nishimura. If you have never heard her music, it is beautiful. The concert band I play with did one of her pieces, and I think programmed 3 of hers now, because they're beautiful, but they're also accessible. So really trying to make sure that my programming reflects my student population. Those have been 3 of the biggest things the last couple of years for me.
Really, really solid advice. I think that pretty much wraps up our time here.
Cody, if people are interested in reaching out and asking you questions, would you want to share some ways for them to contact you?
Absolutely. I need to look it up, but I have a Google Voice number that people can text. One of the nice, I guess you would say, nice things with the pandemic is that my district added Google Voice to our services. And you can call and text that anytime. It goes straight to my phone. That is one of the few work things that I have on my phone. Try to keep some separation.
Sure.
So my Google Voice number is 628 215 1612.
Got it.
My email address, again, I check multiple times a day. Probably my personal one for that, which will be cwmtrpt91@gmail.com.
All right. Well, Cody, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your kind of your tips, tricks that you've learned, but also, kind of how that's helped you develop into who you are today. I know that a lot of what you said for me has been really powerful and impactful. So just thank you so much for coming on. And Andrew and I wish you the best going forward, and we'll have to keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. It was great to see you guys. Great to get a chance to kind of catch up a little bit. Anytime you need anything, anytime you find yourself on the West Coast, please feel free to let me know and get you going. There you go.
All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. And with that, thank you all for listening to the In Good Time podcast. I hope that you have a great rest of your day.